At my family's Christmas Eve dinner, my 9-year-old nephew lifted the gravy boat off the table, looked me dead in the eyes, and poured it straight down the front of my blouse. The thick, scalding liquid soaked through the fabric and burned against my chest while the table erupted in laughter. My sister covered her mouth, pretending to stifle it. My brother-in-law actually slapped the table. My mother dabbed her eyes with a linen napkin and said, "Simone, please do not cause a scene. It was an accident." It was not an accident. My nephew was grinning. Before I could say a word, my brother-in-law leaned back in his chair and said, loud enough for every single one of his dinner guests to hear, "Maybe next time wear something you can actually afford to ruin." The table laughed again. I sat there with gravy dripping off my collar, humiliation burning hotter than the stain on my skin, and I made a decision. I excused myself to the bathroom, cleaned up as best I could, walked out the front door without saying goodbye to anyone, and sat in my car in the cold for exactly 4 minutes. Then I picked up my phone and sent my brother-in-law a text. 3 words. Check your lease. Before you continue, tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever had to choose between your dignity and your silence, hit that like button, because this story is for you. My name is Simone, and at 31 years old, I have spent 6 years perfecting the art of being underestimated. My family believes I work as a mid-level permit coordinator for a small commercial development firm on the outskirts of Charlotte. They see my 7-year-old Honda Civic, my clearance rack blazers, and my studio apartment in a modest part of town, and they see someone who is barely keeping her head above water. They pity me at every family gathering. They speak slowly when they explain things to me, as if the modest address on my driver's license is proof of limited intelligence. What they do not see is the company I built from scratch at 24. What they do not see is Meridian Property Holdings, a private commercial real estate firm that I own entirely, that currently holds the deeds on 11 buildings across 3 cities. What they do not see is the black card I keep in a separate wallet in my glove compartment, or the fact that the building my brother-in-law has staked his entire identity on, the boutique hotel and event space that he brags about at every family function, that building belongs to me. I created the distance intentionally. After my father passed when I was 22, I watched what money did to my family. My sister married my brother-in-law within a year, drawn to his loud confidence and his talk of big plans. My mother let him move into the role of patriarch so fast it made my head spin. I decided then to build quietly. I wanted to know if the people closest to me loved me for who I was, or for what I could give them. 6 years later, sitting in a parking lot with gravy drying on my skin, I had my answer. My brother-in-law's hotel, the Harrington, sits in the historic district of Charlotte. It is a beautiful building, 12,000 square feet, original hardwood floors, exposed brick, the kind of bones that developers dream about. When he came to me 5 years ago, before he knew what I actually did, he told me he had found the perfect property and needed a commercial tenant arrangement because his financing was contingent on the lease structure. He had a loan approval that required proof of an arm's-length commercial lease with a property management company. I was running Meridian under a parent holding group called SPC Capital at the time. I offered him the lease through SPC. He never looked up who owned SPC. He was too excited about the loan closing to read anything carefully. He signed a 10-year commercial lease with a personal guarantee, a morality clause I had drafted myself, and a conduct provision that gave the property owner the right to accelerate lease termination in the event of documented harassment, defamation, or physical harm directed at the owner or the owner's agents. He shook my hand at the closing, called me his little sister-in-law who finally did something useful, and went home to celebrate with my sister. That was 5 years ago. I drove home from Christmas Eve in silence, changed out of my ruined clothes, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the Harrington's lease file. I opened the clause I had drafted myself, physical harm. I touched the red mark still visible on my chest from the scalding liquid. I took 3 photographs under proper lighting and saved them with timestamps. I opened a new email to my attorney and attached the photos. I typed 2 sentences. She wrote back in 11 minutes. By the time I woke up the next morning, Christmas Day, my attorney had filed a formal notice of lease review citing breach of the conduct clause. A certified letter was en route to the Harrington's registered business address. and an automated notification had been pushed from SPC Capital's property management system to my brother-in-law's business email, informing him that his account had been flagged for compliance review and that access to the SPC tenant portal had been temporarily suspended pending investigation. I made coffee. I watched the snow fall outside my window. At 9:47 in the morning, my phone lit up. It was my sister. I let it ring. At 9:49, it was my brother-in-law. I let it ring. At 9:51, it was my mother. I let it ring. At 10:03, a text came through from my brother-in-law. It said, "Very funny, Simone. Call off whatever this is. It is Christmas. We will talk after the holidays." I put my phone face down on the counter and finished my coffee. What my brother-in-law did not realize was that there was nothing to call off. The machine was already running. The certified letter would arrive at his business address in 2 business days. His bank, which had financed the original hotel purchase based on the lease structure with SPC Capital, would receive a formal notice of potential lease termination within 5 business days. The moment his primary lender understood that the foundational lease underpinning his loan was in jeopardy, the dominoes would begin to fall entirely on their own. I did not need to make a single additional phone call, but I did make one. I called my attorney and told her to begin compiling the documentation for formal termination proceedings. She asked if I was certain. I told her to proceed. He found out on the 27th of December. I know the exact time because my property management system logs every access attempt to the SPC tenant portal, and at 2:17 in the afternoon, there were 11 failed login attempts from his IP address. At 2:34, he called SPC Capital's main line, which routes to an answering service during the holiday week. The message he left was 11 minutes long. I have the recording. He called me directly at 2:50. I answered this time. "Simone." His voice was tight, controlled, the way it gets when he is trying to sound calm and failing. "I need you to explain something to me. I just got a letter from an SPC Capital saying there is a compliance review on my lease. You work in commercial development. Do you know anything about this company?" I paused just long enough to let the silence breathe. "I know quite a lot about that company," I said. Another pause. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means you should have read the lease more carefully before you signed it," I said. "Specifically page 9, section 4, subsection C, the conduct clause." I heard him exhale, his voice dropped. "What did you do?" "I took photographs of the burn marks on my chest from the gravy your son poured on me," I said. "I documented the incident, and then I exercised my rights as outlined in the lease agreement you signed 5 years ago." The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. It was the silence of a man doing math he does not want to finish. "You are SPC Capital," he said finally. His voice had gone flat. "SPC Capital is a subsidiary of Meridian Property Holdings," I said, "which I own." He did not respond for a long moment. "That is not possible," he said. "You drive a Honda Civic." "I do," I agreed. "It gets excellent gas mileage." I heard movement on his end. A chair scraping, something being set down hard on a surface. His voice came back louder, the controlled calm gone entirely. "This is extortion, Simone. You set this up. You gave me that lease on purpose. You were waiting for something like this so you could pull the rug out. You are trying to destroy my business over a dinner table accident." "It was not an accident," I said. "And you told 30 people I could not afford decent clothing, while I was sitting there covered in 3rd-degree level burns. I gave you the opportunity to correct your son and apologize. You chose to laugh instead." His voice cracked into something that was not quite a shout but was trying very hard to become one. "This is my livelihood. Do you understand that? I have employees. I have a loan. If this lease terminates, my financing collapses. You could take everything I have built. You should have thought about that before you let your 9-year-old pour hot gravy on your family," I said, "and before you made a joke about it in front of your guests." I hung up. What happened next happened quickly. My brother-in-law called my sister, who called my mother, who left a voicemail so long my phone stopped recording it. I did not call any of them back. Instead, I spent the afternoon reviewing the Harrington file in detail, noting a pattern I had suspected for some time. He had been subletting 2 of the event spaces to a third-party catering company without notifying SPC Capital, which was a clear violation of the sublease prohibition in his commercial lease. I forwarded the documentation to my attorney and asked her to add it to the breach file. By the 29th of December, I received a call from a lawyer named Patrick Hale representing my brother-in-law. He was aggressive in that specific way that lawyers get when they have been hired quickly by a panicking client and have not yet read the contract carefully. He used words like predatory and coercive and made vague references to tortious interference. I listened politely and then gave him my attorney's contact information. He called her. She sent him the lease, all 42 pages of it, including the personal guarantee, the conduct clause, the sublease prohibition, and the 12-page addendum my brother-in-law had initialed on every page and never read. Patrick Hale went quiet for 2 days. When he came back, his tone was different. He asked if there was a path to resolution that did not involve termination. My attorney relayed the question. I thought about it for one evening, then I instructed her to communicate my terms. Full vacation of the premises within 60 days, return of all property in documented condition, and a written acknowledgement of the conduct clause breach signed by both my brother-in-law and my sister. In exchange, I would forgive the remainder of the lease obligation and not pursue the personal guarantee. They could walk away with their debt wiped clean. All they had to do was leave. My sister called me that night. She did not lead with an apology. "You cannot be serious," she said. "We built that hotel. We renovated every inch of it. You want us to just hand it back to you?" "I own the building," I said. "You renovated my building with your loan, which is your business, not mine." "You tricked us," she said. "You let us sign that lease knowing who you were. You let us believe SPC was just some management company." "I let you believe what you wanted to believe," I said. "You never asked who owned the building. You never asked about the company. You were too busy with the closing party to read the contract." "That is not a trick. That is carelessness." She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted. It was softer, the way it gets when she wants something. "Simone, we have a family. We have a son. Do you understand what you are doing to us? You are going to make us homeless." "You have a very nice home that has nothing to do with this building," I said. "Your personal residence is separate from the commercial property. You will not be homeless. You will simply be out of the hotel business. That is my husband's career. And this is my property," I said. "Decisions have consequences, even ones made at the dinner table." She hung up. I sat in the quiet of my apartment and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what was happening. Not satisfaction exactly. Something more complicated. The grief of watching a family choose pride over accountability over and over again, right up until the moment the bill arrived. They did not take the exit I offered them. My brother-in-law held a meeting at the Harrington with his management team and told them everything was fine. He told the staff there had been a paperwork dispute and that his attorneys were handling it. He told my sister that Patrick Hale had found a legal angle that would neutralize the conduct clause. He believed, genuinely believed, that the right combination of legal pressure and bluster would make me fold. What he did not know was that my property management firm had initiated a comprehensive audit of the Harrington's lease compliance during the review period. The sublease violations were the beginning. The audit also found that he had been operating a private event space on the rooftop level that was not included in his original lease footprint, meaning he had been generating revenue from square footage he was not paying rent on. The documentation was clean. The violations were significant. My attorney filed an emergency injunction to compel immediate inspection of the property and an accounting of all revenue generated from the non-leased space. His bank called him on the 6th of January. I know this because Patrick Hale called my attorney on the 7th and asked if we could schedule an urgent call. His voice in the recording my attorney shared with me had lost the aggressive edge entirely. He sounded like a man who had read the lease for the first time and was not happy about what he found. We scheduled the call for the 8th. I sat in my actual office, in my actual building downtown, in my tailored blazer that I paid a great deal for, and I joined the call. My brother-in-law was on the line. He had not known I would be on the call personally. I heard him inhale sharply when my attorney introduced me as the sole principal of SPC Capital and Meridian Property Holdings. He had known intellectually since our phone call, but hearing it stated formally, hearing his attorney treating me as the opposing party rather than the difficult family member, something shifted in him. He tried one more time. His voice was quiet, controlled, all the bravado stripped down to something raw underneath. "Simone," he said, and it was the first time in 6 years I had heard him say my name without contempt in it. "I need you to understand what this building means to me. I have poured everything into it, every dollar we had. If the bank calls the loan, we lose everything we invested. I am not asking you to forget what happened at dinner. I am asking you to separate business from family." "I want to separate something," I said. "I want to separate what happened at that dinner from an accident. Your son has poured juice on my dress before. He has knocked food off my plate. He has said things to me in your home that were unkind, and every single time, the two of you laughed. You told him I was not worth respecting. You taught him that I was beneath your household's standards of basic decency, and he believed you. What happened at Christmas was not an accident. It was the end result of 5 years of instruction, and after it happened, you made a joke about my clothing in front of your guests. You did not ask if I was hurt. You did not apologize. You performed for your audience. So no, I will not separate business from family, because you never did." The call was quiet for a long moment. Patrick Hale cleared his throat and asked if the 60-day voluntary vacation offer was still on the table. "It expired on January 1st, I said. "My attorney will send the formal termination notice by end of business today." The line went dead on their end. The formal eviction process in a commercial case is methodical and cold. There is no sheriff kicking down a door, no dramatic confrontation in a driveway. There are notices and deadlines and legal filings and eventually a locksmith who appears on a Tuesday morning with a court order. I was not there for the locksmith. I did not need to be. What I was there for was the moment 3 weeks earlier when my sister showed up at my office unannounced. My receptionist called up to let me know, and I told her to send my sister up. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to walk through the lobby and ride the elevator and step out into the space I had built, because I had spent 6 years being invisible in her world, and I thought it was time she became visible in mine. She stepped out of the elevator and stopped. She stood in the entrance to my office suite and looked around at the clean lines of it, the city view behind my desk, the framed property maps on the walls, the awards and certifications I had never mentioned at any family dinner. She looked at me sitting behind my desk in the blazer she had never seen before, because there were many things about me she had never bothered to notice. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "How long?" 6 years, I said. She walked in and sat down across from me without being invited to. She had my mother's habit of occupying a room as if it owed her something. She looked at the nameplate on my desk and then back at me. "You let us think you were struggling," she said. "I let you think what you chose to think," I said. "I never told you I was broke. You assumed it because of my car and my apartment and because it made you feel better about yourself to believe it." She flinched slightly. Then the familiar defensiveness moved in behind her eyes. "You had all of this and you let my husband stress over that building for 5 years. You let him take out loans and refinance and kill himself over that business while you sat back and collected his rent payments." "I gave him a lease at below market rate," I said. "For 5 years, he paid me 40% less per square foot than the going rate for that district. I did that because he was family. What I did not do was tolerate being treated like I was something he scraped off his shoe." She looked at her hands. When she looked up, there was something different in her face. Something younger, the way she used to look when we were small and something had gone badly and she did not know how to fix it. "He is scared," she said. "I have never seen him scared like this." "He should have thought about that at Christmas Eve dinner," I said. "What about me?" she asked. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "What happens to me in all of this?" I looked at her, my sister, who had braided my hair when we were little, who had also been the first person to laugh at my car when I drove it to her housewarming party, who had told me at her wedding that I was not in the bridal party because she did not want to explain my dress to the photographer, who had let her son pour gravy on my chest and then told me not to make a scene. "You will be fine," I said. "You have skills. You have education. You will find your way. We built that life together," she said. "You built a performance," I said. "It was always going to end eventually, because it was never real. The money was not real. The image was not real. The building was mine. I am sorry that is painful to hear, but it is the truth." She left without the reconciliation she had come for. I watched her walk back to the elevator, and I felt the weight of it, the grief of it, the way you can love someone and still not be able to save them from themselves. The termination was finalized. The locks on the Harrington were changed on a Tuesday in late February. My property manager oversaw the handover and documented the condition of the building. There were damages. My brother-in-law had removed several of the custom light fixtures in the main event hall, apparently believing he could take them. I billed him for replacement. He did not respond. His bank called the loan. Without the lease structure underpinning the financing, the entire arrangement collapsed exactly the way I had known it would. The hotel closed. The staff received their final paychecks and filed for unemployment. My brother-in-law retained Patrick Hale for an additional 2 months, filing 2 motions that went nowhere, and then apparently ran out of money to continue. I hired a contractor to begin renovation of the Harrington. I had plans for it that had nothing to do with a boutique hotel. I was converting it into a mixed-use community space with affordable commercial units on the lower floors and a financial literacy center on the second. I had been planning it for 2 years. I had been waiting for the lease to naturally conclude or for a breach event that gave me the right to accelerate. Christmas Eve gave me the breach event. My mother called me 7 times in the weeks following the closing. I answered twice. The first call was what I expected, a long appeal to family loyalty and Christian forgiveness, a reminder that I would need these people someday, a warning that bitterness would hollow me out. I listened respectfully and told her I was not bitter. I was clear. The second call was shorter. She asked if I would consider helping them financially, just to get through the transition period. I told her I had already done that, for 6 years, at below market rate. I wished her well and said goodbye. I did not block her. I just stopped answering. What surprised me, in the months that followed, was the quiet. I had braced for more conflict, more legal filings, more calls in the middle of the night. Instead, there was mostly silence, interrupted occasionally by secondhand reports through mutual relatives about how my brother-in-law was doing, which was not well, and how my sister had started working as an event coordinator for someone else's venue, and how my nephew had been transferred to the public school in their new neighborhood and was apparently doing fine, which was the part I held on to. I had set up a small education fund for my nephew, quietly, anonymously, through my attorney. He would not have access to it until he was 21. The provision attached to it required him to complete 100 hours of community service before the funds released. I did not include a note. I did not need credit for it. I just did not want what happened to his parents to happen to him. On a Saturday in April, I drove out to the Harrington to check on the renovation progress. The building was mid-transformation. The walls of the main hall had been stripped back to the original brick. The dropped ceiling was gone, revealing the original timber beams above. Workers moved through the space carrying materials and calling to each other, and the building sounded the way old buildings do when they are being given a second life, busy and alive and purposeful. I stood in the center of the main floor and looked up at the beams. I had loved this building from the moment I found it. That was why I had offered my brother-in-law the lease in the first place, because I wanted to see what it could become. I had hoped it would become something built on honesty. It had not, but it would become that now. My project manager walked me through the plans for the Financial Literacy Center. The classroom would seat 40. There would be a resource library, a mentoring suite, a small event space for workshops and guest speakers. We were partnering with 2 local credit unions to offer free financial counseling on Saturday mornings. I was funding the first 3 years of operations entirely myself. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I did not recognize. I read it at the next red light. It was from my nephew. He had apparently gotten my number from someone. The text said only, "Hey Aunt Simone, I hope you are okay. I am sorry about Christmas. Mom made me do it. I just wanted you to know I know it was wrong." He was 9 years old. I pulled over. I sat for a moment and thought about how a 9-year-old knows who to blame and who to apologize to, and what it means that he chose to do it anyway. I typed back, "I know. Thank you for saying that. I am proud of you for telling the truth." Then I added, "Be kind to people. It is the most important thing." He sent back a thumbs-up emoji, and then a heart. I sat in my car for a while after that, parked on a quiet street in Charlotte with the windows down and the spring air moving through, thinking about what it means to build something real versus something impressive. My brother-in-law spent 5 years building something that looked like success. He put it all on a foundation he never owned, in a building that was never his, for an audience he was trying to impress rather than a life he actually wanted to live. I spent 6 years building quietly, alone, without an audience, without credit, without anyone to celebrate the milestones with. I started the car and drove home to my apartment in the modest part of town that I live in entirely by choice, that I pay for in cash every month, in a building I do not own but could, and I made dinner and ate at my own table and did not need anyone to validate the meal. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed the plans for the Financial Literacy Center one more time. I had named it something simple. I had named it for the idea I wanted every person who walked through the door to carry with them. The sign above the entrance would read, "What you build in silence is yours forever. The things built on performance belong to the audience. Choose carefully." I closed the laptop and turned off the lights and sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the city outside, thinking about the gravy, the laughter, the text from my nephew, the brick walls being restored in a building I have owned for 5 years, thinking about how long it sometimes takes for the truth to surface, and how, when it finally does, it tends to be very quiet and very complete. Some people spend their whole lives trying to sit at a table that was never built for them. I built my own. It seats 1 or 12, depending on the day, and every single chair at that table belongs to me. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. If you have ever been the person in the room that everyone underestimates, hit that like button and subscribe. There are more stories here for people who build in silence. I will see you in the next one.